What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Luke here to bring you the last look for the Thursday night football slate, bring out all of the inactives and actives, give you an idea of what has changed in terms of ownership, things we need to keep in mind when building our lineups. And tonight, I'm going with a 20 max myself, going to be hand building all 20. So it's going to be especially game theory based this side. I can see we got Robert already down there. You'd love to see it. And let's get this thing cracking. We'll catch up on chat here in a little bit. But to start it off, let's take a look at the lines, which in terms of over under has held pretty steady throughout the week. It's there at 54 points, which is, I believe, 0.5 off what we saw there on Monday. The spread is still 4 points for the Chiefs. So that also has been relatively consistent throughout the week. And I tend to agree with it, which I guess is a hot take. Somebody out there really took exception to me picking the Chiefs here. And while I think it'll be a competitive game, anyone could win. I do think that the edge, or even if it's just a slight edge, right, is on the Chiefs side. But I'll be playing game scripts for both teams. There's definitely a circumstance where the Chargers go out there and dominate. Let's say Patty Mahomes falls a little bit flat, because just remember, towards the beginning of last year, Patty Mahomes started off very dull. He wasn't going out there posting 3-4 touchdowns. From a fantasy perspective, a lot of people were worried about him last year, and that was even with Tyreek Hill. So don't think that, a bum performance from Patty Mahomes isn't possible. Don't think you have to lock both of these quarterbacks into every single lineup. You still want to consider going with an onslaught for either team. And I do think that the chalk build here is going to be a 3-3 or 4-2 for either side. Again, most people out there are hyping this up as one of the best Thursday night football games out there. And while I agree, right, it's two really good teams. We usually don't see that on Thursday, right? It's a little bit of a treat this time around. Don't get tricked into playing that chalk build, right, that you want to see happen where both teams go out there. It's some big shootout. I want that to happen as much as the next person, but most of the time when we're playing DFS, the leveraged way to win a GPP is to go for a 5-1, to go for a 4-2 stack that's really contrarian with the two run backs on the team that's an underdog. That's the way to win a GPP. These 3-3 stacks, I mean, it's just been shown time and time again. Its ownership in a large field GPP is well above its expected win rate for a 3-3, or even some of the 4-2s that are a little bit weak, a little bit chalky there. They also have a lower than expected win rate. So on a slate like this, when you're going to get so many people that are playing that narrative, taking three players from either team, it's going to be even more so non-ideal, right? You're cornering yourself in with a larger percentage of the field. It's already a negative EV to play to begin with. And like I mentioned, even the Chargers, that I think more often than not lose this game, could still go out there and kill the Chiefs. That's within the range of outcomes here. So I'm going to have lineups that play that sort of spread. I just wanted to show that to you guys. And just, again, the general consensus is that this is going to be a super close game. And I think that's probably the most likely outcome. But based on how everyone else is playing this slate, I don't know if that's the prudent move when it comes to playing it in Showdown, right? We should expect a lot of wild stuff to happen, right? We had two backup tight ends for Seattle scoring for the Monday night slate, which one of them was in our player pool. One of them I made fun of, right? Parkinson. I was like, who the heck even is that? Of course, scores a touchdown out there, has a good day. But Disley still got there. He was the nuts at tight end. That's the one that I had, ended up working out for me. You have to expect the unexpected with DFS. And the unexpected tonight is a team going out there and whooping the other team's ass, right? And if you play that game script tonight, you're almost immediately going to make yourself unique. Just doing that alone, right? So if you're somebody like me that's only playing 20 lineups, that doesn't have a million bullets to work with, why wouldn't I try and get contrarian like that, right? Maybe take 10 lineups where I play them with a stack towards the Chargers, and then maybe take 10 lineups where I'm stacking it towards the Chiefs, right? That seems like a pretty reasonable take for me. So that's what I see myself doing. Heading over here to the player pool, we'll do that now. So let me go ahead and share my screen. We have arguably the most exciting game in Thursday night football history, says Robert. Yeah, I honestly agree. There's a lot of hype. There's going to be a lot of people watching tonight. Robert says, Dan McKitty, 12% projected ownership. I was fading before that. Yeah, I have him down there too. Actually, do I have him on my projections? So I don't have him highlighted on here. He's coming in with a pretty decent projection, right? He's only $400. And him and Guin are like the pseudo wide receiver number 4. I think that both will have equal chances to have a look out there tonight. All it takes is one big play, right? And especially if you're at $400, like McKitty down there, it's it's hard to pass that up, right? And he's only what, like 11-12% owned, which you might think is a little bit high, except that this guy saw some time there in week 1, and now without Keenan Allen there week 2, I guess that's worth noting, right? So I guess I glossed over that, right? We already knew that on Monday. Keenan Allen out, Harrison Butker is out as well. That means that we're going to have Matt Amendola playing kicker for the Chiefs. He's the same price tag as Harrison Butker. So if you built lineups early, which by the way, I don't think is a smart move, right? You want to wait until ownership as mature as humanly possible. But he can fit in right into that same slot. He's at that same price tag. I project him for the same amount of points, though he's likely a lower quality kicker than somebody like Harrison Butker. You have to assume that most of your points at kicker come due to the actual volume, the opportunity that you're presented isn't as correlated to your actual success. So maybe it's a little bit of lazy analysis, but I just went ahead and plugged in his projection there, and that makes him a great play. I think that he might be a little bit lower owned than he should be because it's a backup kicker. People don't have that all that much faith in him. And really, and I don't know why we're skipping down to the kickers right now. We're obviously going to go up to the top. We're going to talk about the studs here in a second. The Amendola is an intriguing play because he's still going to get that opportunity. And like I mentioned, it's all about opportunity with the kickers. It's not about the skill level, right? That's, not as correlated to their success as anything else. Like Young Ho Koo, for example, he gets so many field goal opportunities because of the relative inefficiency of that offense in the red zone. I mean, Matt Ryan last year was a laughing stock in the red zone. This year, Mariota is probably going to be that same sort of way. Young Wei Koo is just going to go off. He's probably going to be a Pro Bowl kicker again, not because he's accurate, that great of a kicker, but more that he's in that opportunity. So look out for Amendola. And yeah, McKitty down there at $400. I have to watch out for him too. You might have an opportunity to go off at that price tag. But let's go to the top. Let's talk through some of the game theory here. And I mentioned that the really popular pick this week is going to be to pick one of these quarterbacks. It's going to be to 3-3 stack it. So with one of the quarterbacks that you're taking, probably matching up with 2 wide receivers, maybe a tight end there. And then on the other side, you might not be able to afford the other quarterback, but maybe you take a running back from that team, right? And maybe one pass catcher, one kicker might be a piece of value that you take from that team. You might think that you're being unique there, right? Because, I'm taking a kicker. I'm taking one of these tight ends. That's going to be like 10-15% owned. Everyone is going to play that lineup. And even if you leave like $1,000 on the table, I can almost assure you that if you're in any sort of large field contest, that you're going to have a 150 maxer that duplicates himself with you, if not like, 20, 30, 100 of your best friends out there. So that's why I warn against this like 3-3 split. To get unique here, I don't even know who you would take. I mean, like Joey Fortson, right? You're going to have to force in a lot of really uncomfortable plays if you decide to play that even game script. Like a Xander Horvath, he's going to be low, and right, he scored last week. I doubt it happens again. I might have to take like a Michael Byrne. He's going to be like 0.2% owned. He'll score a touchdown like once a year from the fullback role there on like the 1 yard line. I mean, he could take like Sony Michel. It's just a lot of really ugly plays that you're going to have to take in that sort of 3-3 balanced build. To have any sort of chance of being unique. And that's even a chance. You're probably still going to duplicate yourself because everyone's going to play that way tonight. And again, maybe that's going to be the optimal play. Like I mentioned, it's probably the most likely outcome. It's just that if you're playing in these large field contests, it's a lot more about the game theory side of things than it is projecting it, right? People don't know what the hell they're talking about. It's Showdown. It's a single round sample size. Anything can happen. And we've already proven that 1 week into the year that people have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, look at that Tampa Bay versus Cowboys game. No one projected that to happen. I can guarantee you that. Just don't look too much into the projections. We think we know what's going to happen more often than not. And it's especially so the case with golf, right? But especially over here with NFL, we're more often than not wrong. So expect that when you're building your Showdown lineup. So for me, I'm going to try and stick off of that. If I take a quarterback here, and obviously they're going to be like 50% plus owned. You can see I have 50.6% on Justin Herbert there, 15.3% in the captain slot. So that's right around 65%, almost 66% cumulative ownership. Mahomes is even higher than that. He's closer to 70% cumulative ownership. You're going to have a hard time getting unique, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a 4-2 or a 5-1. So I'm not going to go live in that 3-3 range. I'm going to take Justin Herbert. At least 2 pass catchers from that team. So maybe just to give you an example, right? Like a Mike Williams, let's see Joshua Palmer as another pass catcher, and maybe mix in Austin Eckler because I still think that he can get there, at $10,000, especially if it's an onslaught. If it ends up being like a 35-17 game, that I think could happen in either direction. Heck, even with Patty Mahomes, right? You could take Mahomes, take Kelce, and maybe Juju Smith-Schuster, take that premium stack, mix in Amendola, like I mentioned, who might be a little bit lower owned, and run it back with two cheap options from LA, right? Maybe you take Josh Palmer, you take Trey McKitty. You might have to go that cheap. I'm not sure where we're at in terms of price there. But that sort of build where you're going with a 4-2, even a 4-2 might not be aggressive enough. You might want to go with a 5-1. I'm going to have plenty of 5-1s for my lineups tonight. That's just a good way to get contrarian and to still play the best plays on the slate, right? Because all of those names that I just talked about for either team with that stack, you'd be playing in the 3-3. They're the best plays on the slate, right? But there's just better ways to utilize them where you can correlate your lineups a little bit more and, let's say, prepare for a game script that other people aren't, right? Because I can tell you, like I mentioned, I'm going to say this like a million times, and I'm sorry if it's getting annoying at this point, because I'm trying to make this point clear. The likely game script is that it's a close shootout, right? That's what everyone wants to have happen tonight. But if you're accounting for that, just know that you're going to have a really hard time winning at DFS because everyone's going to do that. And then you're going to have to differentiate within that sort of game script, which is infinitely more difficult than just playing another game script. And also, I would say infinitely lower EV than going to the other game scripts. Because if you know anything about large field GPPs, when you're playing against a third, even half the field, like I think half the field tonight, guys, might play a 3-3 script. Good luck with that. Playing against like 100,000 other people in that large field GPP. I mean, that just sounds like a losing game to me. We have Robert says, Dan McKitty, 12%. Yeah, we talked about that. My bad. Marsh Shark says, would all 20 of your lineups be Charger focused? No. So I was just mentioning the Chargers as a potential stack. I mentioned at the beginning doing a 10-10. So I'm going to take 10 teams where I'm stacking the Chargers, 10 teams where I'm stacking the Chiefs. That's how I plan to do it tonight. And in the Patreon later, I'm actually going to talk through some of the game scripts that I'm envisioning. So make sure to pop on in there too. I'll go ahead and let you know kind of what I'm thinking. Martin says, everyone thought LA versus Las Vegas was going to be a shootout, and it was Belay. Always got to prepare for the unexpected. Couldn't have said it better myself. And honestly, I agreed, right? Everyone wants to see those close, explosive games. And I know the last time that these two guys played, I believe both times last year, even, it was like a really high-scoring, close game. So there's a lot of data to back that up, right? It's not just that people are wishing for it. But yeah, it's a volatile sport. We see a lot of crazy stuff happen. And Mahomes last year struggled on a lot of games. Like, people forget about that. Spin facts with the GTO. Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into this. So we talked about some of the elite options. I love both quarterbacks. I don't think you have to avoid them. I think they make plenty of sense. Now, if you're playing 20 lineups and you want to go with just one team, right? So maybe if you're only playing Charger stacks, then maybe take Mahomes out of your pool. I don't know. You could be a little bit aggressive in that fashion, right? Try and get a lot of leverage to the field. Again, I'm taking more of like a 10-10, 50-50 stack there, but all the power to you if you want to be even more aggressive than me. And I think even a 50-50 stack is probably aggressive enough. I'm still behind Kelce. He's an absolute target monster. Him and Juju are going to get at least like 45-50% of the target share on that team, if not higher, maybe closer to 60% on a lot of games, because Kelsey's going to get right around 35% when, especially in close contests. I'd especially expect Mahomes to look his way a little bit more. Juju looks to be right around like a 22 to 25% target share, which is what I projected him for going into the year. So that's good to see that we're getting the data to back that up. Outside of that, Scantling and Hardman, they're the two players that I think their targets are going to be a little bit volatile. You might have a few games where you have Scantling really go off and demand more of the offense. Perhaps it's matchup based because they're hunkering down on a Kelce and Juju, and vice versa with Mecole Hardman, right? Obviously, they're going to play a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, so you might see all 3 on the same field at the time, but I expect one of them to kind of dominate the script game to game. So don't mind playing either of them here when it comes to DFS. And kind of like the 2 quarterbacks up top, right? Like, if you want to take a stand between the two, then go ahead and do so. I don't have information on who's going to be that guy. I think it's legitimately like a 50-50 coin flip type of situation. And at least this early in the year, we have to treat it that way, right? We don't have a large enough sample size to act on. So I think that they're both solid plays. Unfortunately, I can't really give you which one I like better because I think that they project for nearly the same sort of value. Joshua Palmer, I absolutely love here. I kind of want to play him at captain just because he's $5,000. And if you do, sure, you can play both quarterbacks. But again, I don't want to play a 3-3 game script. And if I'm going to play both quarterbacks, the reason why you kind of have to play a 3-3 game script if you play both quarterbacks is you have to have like two guys that catch the ball, because these quarterbacks aren't going to score 25, 30 fantasy points unless they're throwing like 3-4 touchdowns, right? So, you want to have at least one pass catcher, ideally at least two, maybe one receiver, one running back from that team, if you're going with that sort of game script, which is why I'm kind of avoiding that strategy. So, if I was playing both quarterbacks, I would probably consider playing Joshua Palmer at captain, but I just don't have a need for it at this point. Honestly, if I were to take one of these teams, like let's say if I was only playing the Chargers today, which is not what I'm doing, right? I'm playing both teams. Maybe I'd even play Justin Herbert at captain. But because I'm playing both teams here, I'm playing like a 10-10 script between my 20 lineups. I'm not going to play either one at captain. I'm going to take shots on guys like a Kelce. We're going to talk about Mike Williams here in a second, who I think are great options. And Mike Williams, for example, he's going to be the clear number one wide receiver. I mean, there's a few weeks between him and Keenan Allen where he's going to dominate that snap share. Without Keenan, there's no question mark about it, right? He's going to be that number one sort of guy. The one thing I want to think about with KC is that they've got a lot of young corners, right? They're not that experienced. They're also not that large in stature. I think that Mike Williams could be in for a huge day. He likes to high point the ball. He's a deep play threat. Is going to go out and attack it 50 yards down the field. I like his chances here. I think that he had a ugly week one, was pretty much non-existent. Perhaps that's why his ownership's only there at 36.3%. Because if he was coming in with any sort of form, if he showed anything in week one, Mike Williams might be 50% owned. He'd be, even Travis Kelce, I'm actually kind of surprised he's only 32% owned. That's why he's still in my player pool, right? He's not mega chalk. And sure, he's expensive, right? He's $11,000. But I think that's well warranted. Kelce could go out there and drop a 30 burger tonight. I don't think that would surprise anybody. Mike Williams has a similar type of ceiling, right? Because he's that number one option out there, deep play threat. He could post you 100 yards, 8 catches, a touchdown or two, get you 30, 35 fantasy points, and be the nuts at captain. So I see myself going that direction there with Kelce, Mike Williams in my personal pool. But I understand if you played quarterback captains. It happens a lot of the time, but it happens less than the rostered. I believe like the average captain percentage is like they're played like 30 or about like 33, 35% of the time. It's something in that range. Is the average cumulative quarterback captain ownership on an average slate. And the optimal rate for them is like 20%. So they're played at nearly double the clip that they're optimal over here on Draftkings. So that's why I tend to stay away from them. So move down into this 8K. We talked about Mike Williams. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think, is an okay play. I think he's coming in with just about adequate ownership. He's not really moving the needle in either direction. I don't think he's a fantastic play. I don't think he's a horrible play. Somebody who, if you're somebody that matches the field on players, maybe you do it with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm not one of those people where I'm either going to get leverage or not. But if you were, I definitely think that's the sort of player I would do it on. Juju, we talked about these two Chiefs wide receivers. Again, I think they're both great plays. I just don't know which one's going to get more of the targets. I wouldn't play them together. I'll say that. Scantling and Hardman, I'd probably avoid double stacking them, right? I'd either take a Juju or a Kelce up top. If you need a little bit of salary savings, take one of these two mid-tier options and go that direction. You have Palmer versus Carter here. And at the beginning of the week, I had them at similar ownership levels. Now Palmer's near 30%. I have Carter closer to 20%. So there's about a 10% gap between the two players, which makes sense. I mean, Palmer's the better player. He's the one with hype going into the year. If you're somebody who likes to look at week one usage rates and use them there for week two, you're going to be all over Carter here, right? He's lower owned. He had higher usage in week one, but I'm more of a long-term guy. If you've been watching me on golf, you know that I'm all about long-term sample sizes. And that's really the thing here with Josh Palmer. He's a great player. I mean, even Justin Herbert, they asked him, like, if you could draft one player in fantasy this year, who would you draft? He said Joshua Palmer, right? So he was expecting to throw the ball a lot to Palmer this year. Now Keenan Allen is out. I don't know. I'm kind of talking myself into playing him at captain a little bit because I think he could be that guy today that puts up like 20, 25 fantasy points. But at the very least, going to be one of my highest owned players in the flex spot. Gerald Everett's all right. We talked about Carter. I don't think it's a horrible play. I'm probably still going to have him in my pool, but I just think that Palmer's probably got a little bit more upside. Isaiah Pacheco only got run in the second half last week, so he's also relatively low owned. Not really somebody that we have to worry about all that much. He might end up vulturing a touchdown, and that'd be a little bit tilting, but I personally won't be there all that much. I like both kickers. That's why I have them highlighted here. They're both relatively middling owned, right? 17% on Amendola, who's the favorite. You have 15% on nearly 16%, I'd say, there on Dustin Hopkins. I think they're both great plays at the flex spot. The defenses, on the other hand, they're a little bit more of a wild card. Their floor is right around like 0, maybe even negative fantasy points, as you'd expect in this high of a game total. But because both teams are expected to pass so much, it should be a relatively high-paced game with a lot of possessions. I envision, or at least I could envision, a game where there'd be like 3 or 4 turnovers for one side. And if that happens, even if they score 30 points, you're going to be looking at right around like a 7-8 fantasy point performance, let alone if they add a few sacks to the ledger, right? I mean, if they get like a 5-sack, 3 turnover game, right? I mean, that's a easy optimal performance right there. So just because it's a high game total, I wouldn't say to just blindly avoid the defenses. I only avoid the defenses when it's a low game total, when it's a low pace game. So, for example, when you had the Bills versus the Patriots, now the Bills can move with pace, but it was in a horrible weather situation. So we knew they were going to run the ball almost all day. And they did that. They hardly ever passed it. When they did, Josh Allen was actually pretty good that game, which was surprising. I think that surprised a lot of people, including myself. But the Patriots, we knew were going to run slow like they do all year, and they were going to go with a rush first attack. In those games, I hate defenses. And in fact, they ended up kind of being all right. I believe one of the sides was optimal. It might have been the Buffalo side that ended up being optimal that game. But I actually prefer these type of situations. Maybe, when it's extreme weather, I shouldn't say that. When it's extreme weather, you play the defenses. That makes sense to me, right? But when it's just a low total affair and you don't have that extreme weather, I'd actually prefer when there's going to be a ton of volume. When you have teams that are going to drop back, the more teams pass, the more fantasy points you can score in defense. That's the real correlation when it comes to fantasy points. Because think about it, you score points when you get picks, you score points when you get fumbles, which could happen when a receiver fumbles or when a quarterback gets sacked and fumbles. You also get points when you get sacks. We got talked about fumbles, and then of course interceptions. So all 3 of those ways. And the more you pass, the more opportunities you're going to have to do so. Let's catch up on chat, see what's going on. Martin says, we already talked about that one. Talked about that too. Max says, are you doing a round 2 showdown? Maybe later on. We'll have to see. Again, it's not going to end till like 10 p.m. And I go to bed at like 11 p.m. So we'll have to see, Max. I can't promise you either way. So he says, if we get beat by not playing defenses, I can live with that. That's been my thought process. Now, I will say, Sway, that's happened to this point. They've had defenses in the optimal, I believe, twice already, right? So 2 out of 3 slates so far, I've gotten screwed on not playing the defenses. But you're right. That's a good thought process to have. But yeah, I do think that there is an opportunity, right, for the defenses to get there. I at least wanted to go ahead and let people know that. But I tend to agree with you, Sway. I mentioned that on the other stream. I'm not a huge fan of playing defenses, but it could be there. Robert says both QBs could throw 40 times each. Yep. Pat could throw a pick 6. Correct. Same thing with Justin Herbert and get there in the optimal lineup. What do you think about the negative correlation with the QB versus opposing defenses? Yes, I'm okay with doing that. So I'm actually here with Sway. I'm not going to be playing defenses tonight, just for full disclosure purposes, okay? But I'm not against it. Like Robert said, it's going to be super unique. And it's completely viable. If they throw pick 6, I mean, that just throws out all the negative points they're going to get with letting up a bunch. You're talking about sacks that can happen because of all the passing, all of those turnovers that are likely to happen. I believe the prop line on Mahomes to throw a pick tonight is like minus 130, minus 140. It's a similar number for Justin Herbert. And I project it, at least per the projections that I run, closer to like 1.9 interceptions for either team. Well, that's pretty decent odds, right? If you go out there, you get a pick, like 3 sacks, like that's a 7-8 point performance for the defense. And if that's going to be your projection, I mean, obviously there's ceiling performances out there too, right? Wacky things that can happen. I think you're onto something there, especially because it is going to be unique. Now, am I going to get there? No, because I'm only playing 20 lineups, but I do think it's worth mentioning. I think it's a really good thing for you to point out there. Moving into the value range, a little bit past the defenses. Sony Michel is the backup running back, at least on the depth chart for the Chargers. I'm just not sure he's going to get enough run. So maybe if you're playing with a set of 150, you can mix him into your player pool, but I'm probably going to avoid him. I do love Jerick McKinnon, though. We know that even though CEH is going to get a majority of the run for the Chiefs, that McKinnon is going to get mixed in on third down. I mean, he's a third down specialist. Great blocker if they need him to. He's a willing blocker. Also, more than capable at catching the ball out of the backfield. And also is going to get some run rushing the ball, right? He's not just somebody they're going to use as a scat back. So I do like McKinnon. I project him for 7.7 points, 22% ownership, which for a value pick is chalk, right? He's going to be one of the highest owned players down low, but it's well warranted. I think he's going to get the ball a whole lot. And especially even in runbacks, but especially in some of my Chiefs heavy stacks, he's going to give me a lot of flexibility, right? Because he's only $2,600. A lot of times when I'm playing Mahomes, it's going to be with Travis Kelce, who I think is being criminally underowned. And the reason for this, by the way, guys, is because you have to think about it. If everyone's trying to play both quarterbacks, they're both like 50% owned. A lot of people are going to try and jam in both into their lineups, play that 3-3 script. You're not going to have enough salary to play Kelce, like at all, right? And if you do play all three of these guys up top, you're not playing anybody here in this like 8 to 6K range. You're not going to be able to fit in anybody else, right? So that's the reason why he's a little bit lower owned, which I like. That's why I'm trying to keep it a little bit more one-sided when I'm going either direction, right? I'm not trying to play this 3-3 script because it's more expensive too. To take a lot of these premium options up top. So I do like McKinnon. Sky Moore, he got a few targets in week 1, but he didn't play a ton of snaps, which is kind of disappointing. I took a shot on him. I mentioned him as a value pick for the main slate, and I believe he only scored like 5 fantasy points. He just didn't get the run that you're looking for. But in a showdown, now that he's only $1,800, I think that he's especially viable because he looked explosive. He made multiple people miss on the one catch that I saw him make. He was wide open because of how shifty that he is. He's the sort of wide receiver, he's a rookie, right? He's playing an Andy Reid offense, which is one of the more complicated schemes in all of the NFL. It's going to take him a little bit of time to catch on. And when he does, I think that Reid's going to get him the ball a lot, right? He's going to make people miss. And that's kind of what Andy Reid's thing is. He wants to get the guys that are the most athletic, the most shifty of the ball the most often, right? And I don't want to say they don't have to be great players, but they don't, right? He's able to make players that are a little bit maybe not so technical play like technical players. So hopefully Sky Moore, even as a rookie, might be able to go out there and get the job done. I think he's worth playing at $1,800. Still on Guyan, we talked about him at $1,200 during my preview earlier in the week. He's a wild card at best. I only project him for 2 points, but also he's only coming in 2.2% owned. So McKitty up here, where's McKitty at? Oh, sorry, actually down here is only $400. I project for more points than Jalen Guyan. He's also about 3 times higher owned, but I'm going to end up playing both of them. I think they both have a decent shot to get there. And unless you're taking shots on everybody down low, you're playing both defenses, etc. You can still get leverage to these sort of players, and you can play both of them together. If you really want to play the defenses, then maybe choose one or the other, right? You can't play both players, but I think they're both worth taking shots on. From the Chiefs side of things, you have Joey Fortson, who's, he has wide receiver here, but I think he's a little bit more of a tight end, if I have to be honest. So you take a chance on him. We talked about McKitty at $400. You have Michael Burton, who's going to get a few goal line snaps if they get down there to the 1 or 2 yard line. There's definitely names that you can get to. Now, are they great names? Absolutely not. But we've seen crazier things happen. Parkinson in the optimal lineup. We have multiple backup tight ends that have run over the first just 3 primetime games of the year. And that's just the start. They're going to see even more to come throughout it. Let's go ahead and see what we got in terms of questions in the chat. I'll remind you, we're going to do a prize picks preview here in a second too. So after we go through the questions, I'm going to bring up prize picks and we'll talk through that. Let's see. We have Robert who says it's the optimizers that can't fit Kelce in. Exactly. Yeah. Because they're trying to take all of those 2 quarterbacks together, all that sort of fun stuff. Martin says JC Jackson is playing tonight. Okay. That's good to know. That's a defensive piece that might shake things up a little bit. Okay. He said, yeah, big help. Yeah, big help to that defensive side. That's for sure. He's one of the better corners in the NFL. If there's, we'll go over the DraftKings. So if you have any questions, still feel free to go ahead and put them down below. I'm going to slow down here. I got a coffee here too that I need to remind myself to drink. But let's talk through some game theory. Let's talk through how I'm going to correlate some of these lineups. So for the most part, I'm playing onslaught scripts for each team, right? So if you're just getting in here, if you haven't been here the whole time, which is all right, by the way. I know sometimes you guys are a little bit late. You have things that you're doing. My thought process here is that a majority of people are going to play this to be a close competitive game. And while that might be the most likely thing to happen, the contrarian plays are going to be to play an onslaught, right? Where you in an onslaught, right? If you're new to PGA DFS, not PGA, what am I saying? Gosh, I'm so used to that at this point. NFL DFS, that means that you just take a team with a 4-2 stack, so 4 players from that team, 2 players from the other team, or a 5-1 stack. You're expecting that team to put up most of the production, win a game maybe in like a 35-17 sort of fashion, where maybe a 4-2 would be great for that. If it's going to be like, let's say, like a 35-10 game, a 5-1 stack is probably a little bit more adequate for that sort of situation. Those are the type of game scripts that I'm playing for, because it's going to be widely underrepresented when it comes to the ownership today. And you can still play a lot of the good players. So just to give you an example of what we're talking about here, a good way to do a Chargers onslaught, we're going to do a Chargers onslaught example. And then afterwards, we're going to do a Chiefs onslaught example. And this could be for a 2 to 3 max, large field GPP, whatever it may be. This would be something I do for a high dollar sort of GPP contest. So this is the kind of thought process I go through. In this sort of lineup, I'm going to start with Mike Williams as my captain. The clear next man in has to be a Justin Herbert there. So, taking those two, we're down to $6,000. So we're already starting to think about our ownership a little bit. I talked about wanting to avoid taking both quarterbacks, just because when I do so, I'm tempted to try and stack both teams, and that's going to just push me right to a 3-3 stack. So I'm going to avoid Patty Mahomes. I'm going to go ahead and put Kelce in there because I think he's being widely underowned here. People are trying to force in guys like Mahomes rather than a Travis Kelce. And even though there's an $800 difference, if we're playing an onslaught, right, we expect the Chargers to win this game handedly today. I doubt that Mahomes is an optimal play, but maybe Kelce scores a touchdown, gets you like 8 catches and 60 yards. That gets him to the 20 points that you need, and that still gets him into the optimal, right? Opposed to, like, say, the 16, 17 points that a Mahomes would put up in that sort of script. So that's what we're playing here, right? We're playing for that sort of situation. I mentioned wanting to potentially take Eckler here with these 3 players. You can see that puts us at $2,000 a player, but I also have another player in mind. This is where somebody like McKitty might make a little bit of sense, right? And if we do so, you can see it puts us here in the $3K range. And depending on the sort of contest that you're in, you might want to tinker here a little bit, maybe be a little bit less aggressive. If you're in a large field GPP and you really like one of the defenses, right, they'd be a decent last man in here. If you wanted to go down to Jerick McKinnon, leave $1,100 on the table. I think that sort of lineup, obviously that would be a 4-2 at that point, taking Jerick McKinnon. That would be a really good lineup for a large field GPP. Leaving $1,000 on the table, I still think it projects pretty well there. I'm taking those 4 studs and then 2 value picks that are more than viable to get there. So, like, I don't want to click it in because the DraftKings overlords are going to piss me off, but that would be the optimal build there. I think for a lot of contests, honestly, using this sort of build, but you guys get the idea, right? There's 4 players that are correlated from one team. You have 3 pass catchers from the LA side. You have Austin Eckler, who's going to put a lot of production up on the ground, but a lot of it is going to come through the air too. So he still has correlation with Herbert. You have Kelce, and then we talked about the last man in there, right? Somebody like Jerick McKinnon, who is a good buyback, especially if we're not taking Mahomes, right? You got to think, if Mahomes isn't going off, maybe it's McKinnon stealing a touchdown or 2 on the goal line, right? Maybe he runs into. You can envision a game script where that sort of lineup gets to the nuts, right? In every lineup that you enter, you want to have that same sort of confidence about, right? And that's still asking a lot to happen for that whole thing to come through, right? But it's still possible. You don't want to be entering lineups where it's not actually a realistic chance for it to be the nuts. So that's a thought process. Let's do one now where we're going to go through the Chiefs. And I guess let's put Kelce at captain, because I talked about him as a captain earlier. Absolutely love him. Let's put Mahomes in there. I mentioned, anytime I'm taking one of these wide receivers at captain, I want to pair him up with the quarterback. Let's go ahead and start thinking about some of the buybacks. I do not hate the idea of getting to a Palmer here. Again, I project him from one of the best points per dollar projections on the slate. In terms of some of the other Chiefs that we want to take, we're going to take a chance here, right? So the more expensive play, the one that's more consistent, would be Juju. He's also higher owned. Let's go and take an MVS or a Hardman here. And just based on our money remaining, I think we could probably get away with taking a Hardman or Scantling, but even a Scantling, they're at $6,400. So we've got 3 players from the Chiefs. I want to kind of mix in a running back here now. So I'm actually going to go down and take McKinnon in this lineup. And at this point where we have $7,700 remaining, We have our 4 players from the Chiefs, 1 from the Chargers. We could make this a 5-1 here. I wouldn't be against it. So to make this a 5-1, I mean, you'd be leaving over $2,000 on the table, but you could take a Mecole Hardman. A clear fix here would be to try and open up a little bit more salary, right? So maybe rather than taking an MVS, we go down here to Mecole Hardman. That leaves us with $8,500, and we have our 4 Chiefs to potentially make it a 5-1 with one of these other wide receivers. And it's kind of a dead zone. I wish we would have had like a LA Charger to take here. That would have made some sense. Like a Mike Williams, for example, we're about $500 off of being able to take him. But you guys get the point, right? You want to stack in that direction. Just to give you an idea of how you could finish off this lineup, let's go down there. Be really unique about this. We're going to take, where is he at? In my blind, he's $200. I can't find him. Michael Byrne. There we go. Let's put Michael Byrne in this lineup, okay? So maybe he runs one in from the 1-yard line, okay? We're assuming that you got your 2 pass catchers to go along with Patty Mahomes, 1 in the captain slot, and now you have $10,000 left. Run it back with Austin Eckler, right? This would be a more than adequate sort of lineup. Sure, there's one weird thing that really has to happen with this lineup, but is it possible? I can tell you for sure. Michael Burns probably going to score at least 1-2 touchdowns this year. So that's the sort of idea I'm going with when building my lineups. I'm going to go ahead and catch up on chat. Afterwards, we're going to hop into the prize pick stuff. So let's see what we've got. Colin says, all right, I'm betting the under. I think that's the way to go. I would be doing the same thing. I would definitely bet the under. That they're inflating the line for the excitement around the game. That happens every single time. They're betting the market, not necessarily the outcome that they expect to happen, which for sure, if I had to, if I could look behind the scenes there, look at what they actually project, I'm assuming it'd definitely be the under for their projections, probably closer to like 50 points. Steven says CH or Eckler rushing total. Is that like a matchup? Or are you talking that for prize picks, Steven? So you'll have to go ahead and clarify that for me. If you're asking who I think runs for more yards, that would definitely be Eckler. I think that without Keenan Allen, they're going to have to move the chains a little bit more on the ground than they're used to, especially if they get the ball early. If they get ahead early, he's going to get the ball a lot. So I definitely say him. Colin says Jarek, the Jet Knight, primetime stud. Honestly, Jerick McKinnon. I was like, who are you talking about? And I was like, okay, Jerick McKinnon. Yeah, last year, didn't he break multiple slates? Oh, damn it. So they refreshed it. I was hoping they were still going to have up the stats from last year because I know for a fact he broke at least 3 primetime slates, if not more than that. So yeah, you're definitely onto something there, boss. And let's see. That's it. Cool. Let's go over to prize picks now. So let's bring up NFL. There were 2 props that I really liked, and you guys are going to think I'm just like a certified hater. It's the over on both quarterbacks when it comes to interceptions. They're going to throw the ball a ton. It's a 54-point total. Both defenses are more than adequate on the back end. JC Jackson obviously bolsters that even more. I'd be taking the over. I project both quarterbacks close to 1 interception. It's not even like it's like 0.6, 0.7 interceptions. I believe the last time I ran it, it was 0.85 for one of them, it was 0.9 for the other. That's a really solid over spot, right? It's like it's a crazy edge over the 0.5 rejection. You're looking at like a 60-70% edge, right, for either prop, which obviously it's a 0.5 prop. It's really easy to get leverage on it, right? So, 70% on another prop would be a really huge edge, but here it's still sizable, right? And percentage-wise, looking at a much higher chance of it going over than under. So I like the over on both of those, to be quite frank with you. I've already bet it. I bet it with a few other cards on golf even. Let's look at a few others. In terms of like all the passing yard stuff, I think the plus EV play is the play of the under. These guys, they post these lines out here to try and bait people into taking the overs. Now, am I going to take the unders? Personally, I haven't played them to this point, but I just want to point them out as the plus EV play is probably the under. Over here with some of the like rush and passing yardage, I think that these are coin flips at best. So I would probably just fade them. I wouldn't bet them. I think that, like I said, it's like a 50-50 sort of proposition. Eckler over rush yards, I don't hate. I was looking at that one. I added it earlier in the week when it was a little bit lower. Over here with receiving yards, I think there's Joshua Palmer, who was interesting. He was lower before. It was closer to 40 a few days ago. I still think he could take the over there. Mike Williams is a little bit more of a wild card because he's such a deep play threat. He's got to get you that big reception to get over that 66-yard mark. But without Keenan Allen, there's a really good chance that he does so. The passing touchdowns, I think Patty Mahomes over 2.5 makes sense. Even though I think that it could be a competitive game, right? Like the more likely scenario is either that the Chiefs win or it's a close game, right? Like that's well over 60% of the outcome probability. And if it's either of those scenarios, he's probably going over touchdowns. So I think it's a plus EV play. I'd consider that. This Austin Eckler rushing touchdowns isn't horrible. These receiving touchdown props, I'd take the Kelce one. That Mike Williams one, if anything, I'd take the under on it. That's probably a stay away for me. And outside of that, that's all that I had. I mean, I have my eyes on a few props for week 2, obviously, but I'm going to put a video out there at some point for that. And it just, spoiler alert, I like the over. Wait, they added more? Oh my God. Okay, I got to talk about them now. I'm sorry, guys. This is insane. They added all of the really good situations for interceptions out here. So earlier this morning, when I was looking at this board, there were 4 quarterbacks on here. There were these 2. You had Lamar Jackson was one, and I forget the last one. I think it was Tua. And I wanted to take the over on all 4 of them. And when I was running my interception projections, which I was doing them specifically, I was like really hunkering down on them because, guys, this is a freaking gold mine right here. Slam these in, by the way, if you're on this right now. All of these like low tier quarterbacks like Mills, Burrow, Mariota, Wentz, Trubisky, like especially, they project for close to 1 interception, even in like a low total game like what you have between the Patriots and Steelers. Mariota is going to have, I expect this to be like a rush heavy game between the Falcons and the Rams. I still think they are insane plays for the over. Like they project close to 1. When I get off of here, I'm probably going to put in more. I still have a bunch of golf cards live right now, or else I'd go and just like slam them in right now on stream. But like all of these interception props are just ridiculous. Like I already had the over on Lamar, these 2 quarterbacks that we talked about, the over on Tua. I would add the over on Brady, every single player there. I'd add the over on every quarterback. No, I'm not kidding, by the way. When you look at your projections, you look at the number of interceptions last year. Every quarterback, I believe, except for Aaron Rodgers, there was one more. Trying to think about the top of my head. Aaron Rodgers was negative EV. He didn't throw many interceptions last year, which makes sense, right? He was the MVP. There was a few other quarterbacks where it was like slightly 50-50. It was like they projected for like 0.55 or like 0.6 interceptions per game, which is like a small wedge. Probably not enough to play, but every other quarterback in the league out of 32 starters projected for 0.7 or more interceptions per game, which is why I think this is just an absolute gold mine. Now, I'd probably flex it because, sure, a quarterback could just run into a game script where their team runs it a lot, right? They don't throw it all that much so that they don't throw an interception. But if you flex it and you just, honestly, if you played the entire interception board just for overs and flexed it, I think that you'd make at least double your money. At least. I'm not kidding when I say that. I probably shouldn't even be telling you guys this because it should be behind the Patreon wall, but literally, you can play that entire board and make a lot of money, pretty much print cash. But that's all I've got, boys. Let's go ahead and catch up on questions down there. I hope you're right about Jarek because you have my captain. Yeah, I'm probably not going to take him at captain, but yeah, I think it makes a little bit of sense. And honestly, I don't think it's a hot take. Look at his performances last year, boys. Like it's not like I'm projecting it for some crazy thing to happen. Last year, he absolutely smashed in these same sort of scenarios. So if anything, that's the chalk. He's like 20% owned. So don't be blaming me out there saying, I hope you're right. He's the chalk, bro. Everyone's saying that he's going to play well. Don't put that shit on me. Sway McThunder says, I like McKinnon captain. Shit, I said too much. There's 3 of us now. So I'm saying, bro, he's the chalk. And don't act like he's like some low-owned play calling, bro. Everyone's playing him at captain. Everyone's playing him today. Don't put that shit on me, bro. You said, love it, man. Good luck tonight. Yeah, good luck to everyone out there too, boys. That's all I've got. Before you hop on out of here, feel free to go ahead and smash that like button. And we're going to have even more content throughout the week. There'll be some main slate content coming out. So there'll be top stacks, value picks, some fades and sleepers, all that sort of fun stuff. A live stream that'll be tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. We'll be chilling there, going through all the games. It'll probably be like an hour and a half, 2-hour live stream where we go through every single game script, what I expect to happen, some of the injury situations, pretty much just your comprehensive preview for the week. So if there's one piece of content that you got to be here for, it's that Friday night live stream. It's a culmination of pretty much everything that I do. And the best piece of content I put out, that's what I have to say, at least for the football side. pretty proud of the golf stuff that I put out at this point, a little bit more established. But I appreciate everybody for stopping by. Best of luck, and catch you guys next time.